In the Black Girls with Queen, I wanted to give a shout out to Ring IQ Boxing, and remember to tune in to the motherfucking relay.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. You might have heard that the Huey Fury versus Michael Hunter WBA Final Eliminator has been rescheduled for October 29th. Winner of the fight looks to become the mandatory challenger to Daniel Dubois' WBA regular title. Daniel Dubois, who seems to have his heart set on taking on former WBC interim champion Dillian Whyte. And that's not set in stone. We don't even know if that's actually going to materialize. Better still, the interest has been expressed. The interest is there on the part of Daniel Dubois. And whoever he ends up fighting, whether it's Dillian Whyte or someone else, the winner of that fight will have to take on the winner of this fight if they mean to hang on to that WBA regular title, that secondary title, which is the secondary title to Alexander Usyk's full title, his full WBA title. Michael Hunter versus Huey Fury. An intriguing little matchup. There was a time when Michael Hunter appeared a dark horse in the division, a very capable guy who could be somewhat of a spoiler, but those days have long since passed. Michael Hunter, who sports a professional record of 20 wins, 1 loss with 2 draws, 14 knockouts, his lone defeat came at the hands of Alexander Usyk in the cruiserweight division, and he is looking to get back in the ring with him, though I think he's going to come up short. That's what he said on his social media. He's angling for an Usyk rematch. I don't think he's going to get one, as Alexander Usyk has made his feelings for the future crystal clear. It's either he's fighting Tyson Fury or he's not fighting. It's what he said after he beat Anthony Joshua for the second time. So I don't think Michael Hunter is going to get that opportunity, get the chance to share the ring with Alexander for a second time. Michael Hunter, he saw action 2 times last year against Mike Wilson, the pedestrian-level opponent Mike Wilson, and his old buddy Jerry Forrest. He actually beat Jerry Forrest some years ago, but in their rematch last year, late last year in December, he drew with him. Signs of regression. That's the same Jerry Forrest who, after that Michael Hunter fight, went on to get the shit kicked out of him, the shit beat out of him by Kubrat Pulev, pushing 40. Signs of regression. Regression on Michael Hunter's part, who stands in at about 6'2", 79-inch wingspan, 34 years old. No spring chicken. He's not the youngest fighter, but he's not the oldest either. And he needs to show the world that he's still got it. As his showing with Jerry Forrest, his rematch, was the stinker heard round the world. Everywhere you look, there were people talking about how bad Michael Hunter looked in that fight. How will he look in this one with Huey Fury, who last saw action in October of last year against Christian Hammer, who retired in his corner after facing Huey for 5 rounds. Huey Fury's only boxed once in the last 2 years. Close to 2 years. This will be only his second fight in the last 2 years, and it's an interesting fight. Huey Fury's lost decisions to Joseph Parker, Kubrat Pulev, Alexander Povetkin. What that tells you is he's only good up until a certain level, or he has been. If he has improved since then, we haven't seen it, at least not at that level. The contender level, the championship level. To a lesser extent, to a lesser degree, Huey Fury bears some similarities to his famous cousin, Tyson. Can be long and loose, long and limber, a moving target, sticking and moving and boxing from the outside. At a certain level, Huey Fury can be effective, though when he steps up in class, he has been notoriously gun-shy, not bringing over big right hands. That became sort of a running gag. Michael Hunter, at his best, can be an athletic fighter, a moving target that can step in and out of range safely to plant shots, plant punches. He's a smaller target than most guys in today's heavyweight division. He can be elusive. Yeah, when he's at his best. We don't know what kind of Michael Hunter we're going to get. Hopefully it's not the same one that just fought Jerry Forrest last year. Winner of the fight becomes the mandatory challenger for Daniel Dubois' secondary title, which is an interesting situation unto itself, not just because of the fight, but because of the promotional situation. Daniel Dubois is over there at Queensbury and BT, whereas the winner of this fight fights on Sky and Boxer. Purse bid could ensue. Purse bid between Boxer and Queensbury. That could become a pricey situation for both the promotional outfits. Who wants to stage the fight on their respective platform more? The people at Boxer or the people at BT? The fighters themselves stand to benefit from it, as The higher the bid, the more money in it there is for them. That's if it goes to a purse bid and the two respective parties can't reach a deal amicably. If Daniel Dubois doesn't just decide to chuck that belt, as it might be more trouble than it's worth. In any event, it's good to see that the heavyweights are heavyweighting.
Instead of waiting, they're fighting.
And we'll talk more about this fight as the fight date approaches. And just in keeping with the theme of men's heavyweight news, Deontay Wilder on Anthony Joshua's post-fight anger. The meltdown comes when you create a fighter. You give them everything. Try to avoid tough fights. Then when it boils down to the wire, you don't know who to trust. You've been listening to all this fake stuff.
Wilder's a fucking fake. He's talking about himself if he's talking about anybody.
You often hear it said that Wilder spent the first 7 years of his career fighting no-hopers and fat journeymen and fat cruiserweights because he was a late starter in the sport, but so was Anthony Joshua. He was a late starter in the sport. You often hear it said that Deontay Wilder was learning on the job.
So was Anthony Joshua. He was just doing that with better guys, and he didn't need 7 years to fight for an alphabet title.
He did it in 3. And I know that Charles Martin was very much a champion of circumstance, a champion of opportunity, but so was Bermain Stavern,
who only became a champion after Vitaly Klitschko had officially retired and vacated the green belt, vacated the WBC title.
And he had already been knocked out once before by Demetrius King. When Wilder fought him, Wilder didn't knock him out. The fight went the distance, whereas when Anthony Joshua took on then unbeaten Charles Martin, reigning IBF champion, he stopped that guy easy.
What the fuck's Wilder talking about? He's one of the most protected fighters in postmodern boxing.
He was around for both of the Klitschko brothers, both Vitaly and Vladimir, for at least the first 3 years of Deontay Wilder's career. Vitaly was an active fighter, and even if he didn't quite get the opportunity to fight Vitaly, not that he wanted it, Vladimir was around for several years, and Deontay, he never tried to fight him. Shelley didn't want him to. Shelley thought that Wilder, after 33 professional fights and 7 years as a professional, a newly crowned champion, Shelley thought that Deontay was just a baby.
Those were his words, not mine.
I'm not paraphrasing. I'm not putting words in Shelley's mouth. After 7 years and approximately 32 or 33 professional contests, having become a champion, Shelley still didn't think that Wilder was ready for a Klitschko fight. He called him a baby and said he was tantamount to a prospect.
After 7 years and over 30 fights, he's a prospect.
What Deontay Wilder is doing here is projecting his own inadequacies and shortcomings onto Anthony Joshua, who, if he did start suffering losses and start suffering defeats, it's because he was taking on better fighters than Deontay Wilder was taking at that same stage in his career, about 5 or 6 years into his professional career. Whereas Wilder, 5 or 6 years into his pro career, he was still fighting no-hopers and fat cruiserweights, fat journeymen.
It's night and day between these two. You can tell that Anthony Joshua's people believed in his boxing, and they didn't protect him.
Whereas Deontay, after almost getting knocked out by a journeyman in Harold Sconeers, you could tell they were handling this guy with kid gloves on. They didn't want to put him in there with any interesting fighters for any interesting fights because they didn't think he was ready.
Wilder's a fucking hype job, and he always was.
You'll get some of his corn-pone country bumpkin cult followers to tell you that the reason it took him so long to fight for a title is because he was a late starter, but so was Anthony Joshua. Deontay Wilder was an Olympian, after all, a bronze medalist. That's why he calls himself the Bronze Bomber. So while he might have been a late starter,
that's no excuse. Anthony Joshua didn't spend 7 years fighting fucking nobodies.
Wilder did, because Deontay Wilder is a protected fighter. He always was, and it's the only reason he's made it this far. If they would have let this guy fight the real killers and the real sharks in the water that were in the water way back when, he would have never made it to the green belt.
Give Derek Chisora the same diet of no-hopers and nobodies that Wilder fought the first 7 years of his career.
Give Dillian White that same diet of no-hopers and nobodies. Give Anthony Joshua that same diet of no-hopers and nobodies for over 30 fights over the course of 7 years, and they'd have the exact same record as Deontay Wilder, perhaps even the exact same knockout percentage. A big part of Wilder's selling point.
They market him as this all-time great puncher, this historic puncher, but most of those knockouts are over fucking nobodies.
The first time that he fought a top 10 ranked fighter, he couldn't knock him out. And that was the first Bermain Stavern fight, back when Bermain Stavern was the WBC champion. He fought another top 10 fighter in Tyson Fury. Couldn't knock him out either. He knocked him down, but that's not saying much. Steve Cunningham knocked him down. Nevin Pajcik knocked him down.
And John McDermott beat him, but got robbed. That's another story.
Do you see what happened to Deontay Wilder's quote-unquote all-time great power as soon as he started fighting people with a pulse, people ranked within the top 10? Do you see what happened to it?
Wilder's a fucking hype job, and he always was.
And as stated, he is projecting his own shortcomings and his own inadequacies onto Anthony Joshua. He said something along the lines of, then, when things boil down to the wire, you don't know who to trust. That sounds more like Deontay Wilder after he lost to Tyson Fury than Anthony Joshua. Don't forget that it was Deontay Wilder who accused his own cornerman, his longtime cornerman.
He accused Mark Breland of spiking his waters, said he didn't trust him.
You're telling me he's not projecting his own shortcomings and drawbacks onto someone else, onto Anthony Joshua? Deontay Wilder lives in a bubble. The man's delusional. In Anthony Joshua's 16th professional fight, he was already fighting for a title. Who is Wilder fighting in his 16th professional fight?
In his 19th professional fight, he was fighting a former champion, an all-time great, and a first-ballot Hall of Famer in Vladimir Klitschko.
Who was Wilder fighting in his 19th professional fight? His fans can't tell you because he wasn't fucking fighting nobody. In his 21st professional contest, his 21st professional bout, already a unified champion, he was taking on another unbeaten champion, a young one like himself, in Joseph Parker. That's what Anthony Joshua was doing in his 20th professional fight. Who was Deontay Wilder fighting in his 20th professional fight?
20 fights in, Deontay Wilder was still fighting journeyman.
Took him 7 years and over 30 fights to get up the nerve to fight a semi-solid fighter, a semi-solid champion in a Bermain Stavern, and he wants to accuse Anthony Joshua of avoiding tough fights and tough situations when it was Deontay Wilder who wore headphones to a press conference in order to avoid listening to Tyson Fury.
If anybody's been avoiding things, it's been Deontay Wilder for a very long time.
Deontay and Anthony, they have some things in common. They're both late starters in the sport. They're both former Olympians who medaled in the Olympics, but Anthony Joshua was fast-tracked to the good fighters and the good fights, the interesting situations. That's why he had such a meteoric rise, and that's why for the first 7 or 8 years of Deontay Wilder's career, nobody was paying attention. Not up until Anthony Joshua rolled around. Tribalism set in. The Americans,
the ones who weren't paying attention for a large portion of Wilder's career, finally put a battery in his back.
And here and now in 2022, when both of these former champions are coming off of losses, Anthony Joshua is talking about a November or December ring return. He's not going to spend a year sulking and making up conspiracy theories like Deontay Wilder has.
The night of the Hellenius fight, it will have been a year's time since Tyson Fury kicked Wilder's ass for the second time.
Anthony Joshua is not talking about taking a year off. In spite of having suffered his second defeat to Alexander Usyk, he's talking about coming back before this year is up, because Anthony Joshua has something that Deontay Wilder doesn't have, something he's never had, and that's character.
If Deontay really wanted to prove that he's a better fighter and a better man than Anthony Joshua, he wouldn't have rejected those fights with him so many times.
Well, he rejected several offers from Matchroom 3 years ago, and here today,
he famously rejected a $100 million offer from DAZN just to get his ass kicked by Tyson Fury 2 times.
And more recently, Eddie Hearn reached out to see about opening up a dialogue, see if these two boys can't fight now that they're not champions anymore and they have no prior engagements, and it's more of the same from Deontay. Delusional, deluded Deontay. And finally, just in keeping with the theme of all things heavyweight, Otto Wallin is very eager to face Anthony Joshua in December.
Remember, Anthony says he wants to get back out there before this year is out in either November or December.
There's talk of a potential Dillian White rematch, though for my money, I'd rather see an Otto Wallin fight. I'd rather see some fresh new blood in there. Otto Wallin stated, I think it makes a lot of sense for me and Joshua to fight each other. People in the UK know me for giving Fury one of his toughest fights in his career, and I get a lot of support from over there. I'm always training and trying to get better, and can't wait to go over to the UK and earn my right for another shot at Fury by beating Anthony Joshua. Wallin also felt Usyk showed vulnerabilities in the rematch. It was a great fight, and both guys stepped it up from the last time. I was actually impressed with Joshua's adjustments for this fight. I didn't think he was going to be able to put up such a good performance against Usyk, but he proved to me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, wrong.
Otto Wallin did give Fury more than he bargained for.
Ahead of that Wallin fight, most people were expecting another Tom Schwartz kind of performance for Tyson Fury. They weren't expecting that he would suffer a cut and bleed profusely. They weren't expecting that he would have had to work for it as hard as he did against Otto. And Otto himself,
He was in rare form because Otto Wallin is not a characteristic mid-range to inside pressure fighter.
Otto's a lefty. Otto's a southpaw. And when Tyson Fury started off that fight out of the orthodox stance, Otto was able to give him a lot of problems. It wasn't until a couple of rounds that Tyson Fury switched off to southpaw to offset.
Tyson Fury adjusted, and credit to him. He switched off to the southpaw stance and regained control.
But not before suffering a gruesome cut that was bleeding profusely. A cut that was bad enough that a lot of people feel, if that weren't Tyson Fury, if that were someone else with that same cut, this fight would have got stopped. But because it was Tyson Fury, the ref and the ringside doc, they let him fight on. They gave him the benefit of the doubt, the benefit they may not have given someone else. There are a lot of people that feel that way, and that's the value of Anthony Joshua potentially taking on an Otto Wallin as opposed to someone else like a Zhilei Zhang or a Dillian White in a rematch. Perhaps Anthony Joshua can do to Otto Wallin what Tyson Fury could not. Perhaps Anthony Joshua can stop him.
Don't misunderstand me, because triangle theories don't work in the sport of boxing.
Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury is nothing like Anthony Joshua versus Otto Wallin. The value here is the optics of it all. That Anthony Joshua gets himself back in the winner's bracket against a familiar face who gave Tyson Fury a hard time. A guy Tyson Fury couldn't knock out, couldn't stop. If Anthony Joshua can go in there and do it.
Those are good optics.
There was a lot of talk about Anthony Joshua's angry outburst immediately after the judges' scorecards were read. And I think that Anthony Joshua should hold on to that anger, hold on to that frustration, and take it out on someone. Take it out on someone in either November or December, and let that someone be Otto Wallin. Do to Otto what Tyson Fury could not.
You just fought a southpaw in Alexander Usyk. That's what Otto Wallin is. But Otto Wallin ain't no Alexander Usyk.
He's not as tricky, not as nimble, not as fast. He's actually a bigger target, so he'll be easier to find, and it may be easier to plant the big right hand on him.
Since having fought Tyson Fury, Otto Wallin has looked less than spectacular. He hasn't been the same aggressive customer in his other fights that he was in that fight.
He was more the boxer than the brawler with Dominic Breazeale. He beat that guy on points. And whether he decides to be a boxer in an Anthony Joshua fight or a brawler, I'm fairly confident Anthony Joshua can win that fight. I'm fairly confident Anthony Joshua can stop this guy. And this should be the guy that he faces upon his return. Make a statement.
The anger that he showed after that Usyk fight, anger in and of itself, it can be toxic if you don't have something to channel it into.
Anthony's frustrated. Anthony's angry. I don't blame him, but use that anger. Use it productively. Take it out on someone. Take it out on Otto Wallin.
This is the hurt business. Go in there, hurt that fucking guy.
He already knocked out Dillian White. Zhilei Zhang's interesting, but he's coming off a loss. Go in there and take on Otto. He's coming off a win.
And do to him what Tyson Fury couldn't do. Stop him!